TikTok, time to rock. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon to everyone who's watching from all over the world. Your friendly neighborhood philosopher, David Wood. And with me now is the mighty apostate prophet, who's AP. I've noticed you've been hanging out with Christians so much that you're starting to get a few books in your background.
Oh yeah. And I also have books now in my background because I want to be respected. I want to be, I want to be cool. That's why I also started putting books in my. And I don't read them. Like who reads books? But I have them in my background. Yeah, yeah,
Makes you look and feel smart. So everyone
yeah.
everyone should do that.
Yeah, I also added a mustache, and I have adopted a new name, which is Albert Paul.
The
Uh,
the great The, it would be funny to call you something generic like the great scholar of books, Albert Paul,
yeah, yeah,
the great professor of literology.
Albert Paul.
All right. Well, we are here because well, Good Friday and Easter weekend are coming up here pretty soon. And hey, Pete, I don't know if you have noticed this, but I noticed this. We've talked in the past about how things change in the Muslim community over time, right? Like it's hard to have a discussion and show a Muslim what the Quran says about the Bible and have him change his mind right there. It seems to, or just to give examples, like if you go back 15 years ago and told Muslims, hey, there's a death penalty for apostasy in Islam, almost every Western Muslim you saw would say, "No, that's complete. Come on, that's ridiculous. It doesn't teach that." It was just talking about in battle.
Totally.
If someone leaves Islam in battle and goes and joins the other side and then comes and attacks you, that's all it means. Then you wonder, hey, well, it doesn't say any of that. That's not what it's saying. It says if anyone leaves his Islamic religion, kill him. That's kind of clear. No, no, no. What he really means is same thing with Aisha. Same thing with all kinds of things. Whereas now it's very common for Muslims to admit that Muhammad was with a little girl. Now it's very common for them to admit that yes, there's a death penalty for apostasy. So the change does happen. It just seems to take 10 or 15 years to get people to change their minds. But anyway, the reason I pointed that out was obviously through you go back 15 years when we would talk about the crucifixion of Jesus in the Quran, you'd get pretty much every Muslim you'd run into would say, no, of course Jesus wasn't crucified. And they would give you some version of substitution theory. Whereas now, just like, I don't know, like 2 weeks ago or something like that, I posted 3 Quran verses every Christian should know. And one of them was about Surah 4, verse 157. And I had a lot of Muslims saying that's not what that verse means. That verse isn't denying the crucifixion. Here's what it really means. And it was just interesting that now it's like now it's becoming acceptable to question what that verse is actually saying. And so it's just interesting that we could actually be right now smack in the middle of the time when the Islamic view changes from what it's been for the vast majority of Muslims over 14 centuries to a much, 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 much better view. So we'll go ahead and read the verse here in a second. But let me go ahead and ask you, AP, because you are from some weird sect of Islam. And there are different positions within Islam. You have the dominant position, but there's always been a minority view of 4157. So what did you believe about what the Quran says about the crucifixion?
Well, first off, I would like to argue that I wasn't in a very weird sect of Islam. I was still. It was
You
still.
were weird. Were you a Salafi?
No, I wasn't.
Thank you. So you're in some weird sect. All right, go ahead.
So I was basically part of mainstream Sunni Islam of the Maturidi school, which is one of the three most popular. Actually, Muslims usually accepted only two schools of theology, which is Ashari and Maturidi, and the Salafi school wasn't and still isn't an accepted school among the mainstream Muslims, but it has since in the last century through some traditionalist revivalism become so popular to go with this extreme traditionalist understanding of Islam. But anyway, so I was part of that Islam, and I had a Sufi, a mystical understanding of Islam, which Salafis, traditionalists, consider absolutely terrible today. But in our view, and in my view back then, the view on Jesus wasn't too different. It was simply that it was actually the same. It was that Jesus was not crucified. That when the Quran says that the Quran says they did not crucify him or they did not kill him, but somebody else was made to look like him. So we believed that somebody else was killed in his place, somebody who deserved to die. And it was most commonly believed in our circles that it was actually the person who betrayed him, so Judas, who was killed in his place on that day. But that was a traditional belief that is entirely baseless and doesn't actually have any foundation in fundamental Islamic sources. But yeah, so the idea was the same. They thought they crucified Jesus, but they actually killed somebody else, and Allah then raised Jesus, who is a mere prophet, to himself, to heaven, and later one day he will come back and he will fight for Allah and kill the pigs and you know, things like that, and break the cross, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. Dumb bunch of dumb pigs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stupid
Um,
pigs. Yeah.
all right, so let's go ahead and read this verse. And guys, this will, if you're not familiar with what Islam teaches and some of the problems with it, this is going to be a good introduction. We're going to go ahead and watch the short clip where Sheikh Imran Hussein criticizes the standard Islamic narrative. He thinks there are some holes in the narrative, and just keep in mind there have always been Muslims who believe there are holes in this narrative. I mean, like educated Muslim commentators and so on. And even AP, what you just mentioned, that you your group believed that someone was punished in Jesus' place, but it was someone deserving. You have these you have a couple of categories of understanding, sort of 4 verse 157. There's always been a minority of Muslims who don't believe that this is actually denying Jesus' crucifixion. It's saying something else, and we'll look at what that is here in a few minutes. But even for those who held substitution theory, so you have that. Then you have um, what you might call theistic swoon theory or theistic apparent death theory, where Jesus was nailed to a cross, but he survived it. He didn't actually die from the crucifixion. That is usually associated with Ahmadis. But then even for those who appeal to substitution theory, namely someone else was crucified in Jesus' place and Allah miraculously disguised the person, you'll have 2 variations in the commentaries. One is the volunteer system, where they're coming to get Jesus and Jesus actually asks for a volunteer. He says, all right, guys, who wants to be crucified in my place? I guarantee you paradise if you get crucified in my place. I'm not joking. This is in their commentaries. This is one main version of this story. Jesus doesn't want to be crucified, so he guarantees one of his followers paradise if they agree for God to miraculously transform them to make them look like Jesus. So Jesus is scared of being crucified. He takes a volunteer. Someone volunteers. What? Paradise? Oh, sign me up. So someone else gets crucified in his place.
Somebody has to die.
Yeah, it's all voluntary. And then and then of course you have the divine punishment version. But there are even differences there. There are the passages. There are the tafsir that say there was Judas. There are other commentators who say that it was a guard who was assigned to guard Jesus during his trial, but the guy was like spitting on him and beating him, and therefore Allah changed him. He like switched their looks so that then let's get this Jesus guy. He's like, wait, I'm a guard. What are you talking about? I'm the guard. And they're like, shut up, liar, you're Jesus. And they crucified him. So you have all these variations. And what the most startling thing you find is just the commentators seem to be freely making this stuff up as they go along. Or they're dealing with sources that we're not familiar with, but there is just not a one coherent story, whereas Muslims think there is. And it's the point here is, if you go to 10 different commentaries and they give you 10 different interpretations of that verse, you should probably be open to the idea that that verse is open to interpretation, right? That's all I'm saying. So let's go ahead and check out this verse, Surah 4, verse 157. Here are a couple different translations. So, Pickthall, and because of their saying, we slew the Messiah, Jesus, son of Mary, Allah's messenger, they slew him not, nor crucified him, but it appeared so unto them. And lo, those who disagree concerning it are in doubt thereof. They have no knowledge thereof, save pursuit of a conjecture. They slew him not for certain. And we could read a bunch of these, but you get the point. I'll just read the Yusuf Ali as well. That they said in boast, they here, and now I'll just add what this is talking about, that they said in boast, this is talking about Jews who, according to the Quran, were bragging about killing the Messiah. Very strange. I've never heard. There are plenty of Jews who don't believe that Jesus was the Messiah. It's very odd to think that Jews were bragging about killing the Messiah, but that's what the Quran says here. So, best case scenario, you could say that they're mocking or something like that. That they said in boast, we killed Christ Jesus. So Christ there is Messiah Jesus, the son of Mary, the apostle of God. So they're calling him the Christ and the apostle of God. But they killed him not, nor crucified him, but so it was made to appear to them. And those who differ therein are full of doubts, with no certain knowledge, but only conjecture to follow. For of a surety they killed him not. And the next verse goes on to say that Allah raised him up, raised him to himself. So lots of puzzling features of this. And you can go to the commentaries, and the commentators have differed on basically everything in this verse, almost like every phrase of this verse. There have been different understandings. So for instance, just to give you an example, we killed Christ Jesus, the son of Mary, the apostle of Allah. You go to the Muslim commentaries and they disagree about who is calling Jesus the apostle of Allah. So is that the Jew? Like here in Yusuf Ali, they've got quotation marks around it as if this is one quotation from the Jews who were bragging about killing the Messiah. Whereas you have other Muslims who say, no, what the Jews said is we killed Christ Jesus, the son of Mary. And then Allah says he's the apostle of Allah. So you have disagreements about almost everything on there. The main points of contention are, what does this mean by they killed him not nor crucified him? And then the other is, what does this mean? But so it was made to appear to them. What does that mean? Because that's where substitution theory is being inserted. That when the Quran says it was made to appear to them like this, that means that Allah took someone else, miraculously disguised him, and made him look like Jesus. And therefore, all beliefs about Jesus being crucified are based on Allah being this epic cosmic trickster. He did such an amazing job tricking everyone that now the vast majority of people who've ever lived and heard about Jesus believe that he was crucified, even though he wasn't. So anyway, the question is, what is this actually saying? And I'll say this, if you just read this verse, if you just read 4:157, it really looks like the Quran is denying the crucifixion of Jesus. But as we're going to see, things aren't that clear. They're a bit more unclear than I just led on. But AP, you've looked into this for a while.
Hey.
Yeah, so you understand that the standard Islamic narrative, looks kind of familiar, right? The common Muslim stories that we hear about this seem kind of familiar, as if we can go back and look, and find places where this standard Islamic narrative was taken from. So what have you found? Because you've interviewed Bart Ehrman on this and so on, and so what have you found?
It's a topic that I have been really interested in for quite a while, that I found fascinating, because you see how Islam took influence from different religious groups and myths and stories that people told about different figures, including here about Jesus. But I want to quickly say one thing before we move to that, which is I thought when I read the Quran, and even before I fully read the Quran, when I saw these verses, because they were brought up to me quite often as I was growing up. Um, I always thought this is a. I always got this vibe from that specific verse that I get from the Quran every single time that it talks about Jews, which is this depiction of Jews as these very knowingly wild opponent of terrible evil people, and always mentioned as Jews, not as specific people, but as Jews, who in this case say, "We have killed the Messiah, Jesus, son of Mary," and so you have two options here. Either they know that Jesus is actually a prophet or a messenger or a Messiah or whatever it is, and they kill him, and they are proud of that, and they mock him. They're proud of that, or they mockingly, they don't believe it, but they mockingly, seeing all the things that he does, allegedly all the miracles and things that he does, they mockingly go there and just totally brag about it, like, haha, we killed your guy, we killed the Messiah, we killed the messenger of God. And it is put in such a way that you get this same idea, about the attitude of Jews, as you always get whenever an Islamic source mentions the Jews, that they are terrible people who just want to be here and fight Allah and do evil things to you. And every time I see this verse, I just think of the same thing. But anyway, coming to where this actually comes from. So I talked to Bart Ehrman twice about these topics, and I looked into it myself. I read quite a few sources on this, and so you mentioned that the belief that Jesus was not really crucified, but that somebody else was crucified instead of him, existed in throughout history, throughout Christian history or related history. What we actually have is that there are several sources, several groups that are Christian or influenced by Christianity, that held the belief that Jesus wasn't crucified, and among those, you have the Docetic ideas, which believe that Jesus had a divine nature, which is why it is not possible for him to be crucified. So those people thought, that might be Gnostic people, Gnostic Christians, or Gnostic religious groups. Those people thought that somebody was crucified on that day, but that it wasn't really Jesus. So, and the ideas there are, it was possible that a human body which represents Jesus was crucified, but it wasn't really Jesus himself, because Jesus himself cannot suffer. So there was only a body that, as soon as it felt pain, had nothing to do with Jesus anymore, because the human body is filthy, and Jesus is completely free from being filthy. So he was separated, and he was not crucified. The other idea is that he was not crucified, but somebody else was placed there by him or by others and crucified in his name, that he planned this, or that it just so happened for somebody else to be crucified. There are lots of ideas. Bart Ehrman mentioned some sources. For example, one source is the Gospel of Basilides, where you find a source where it says, about Jesus, about the crucifixion, he himself did not suffer. Rather, a certain Simon of Cyrene was compelled to carry his cross for him. It was he who was ignorantly and erroneously crucified, being transfigured by him, so that he might be thought to be Jesus. According to that source, Jesus also stood by and was like, he wasn't seen, but that guy appeared like Jesus, and Jesus just stood there and laughed or smiled, which
they should have had it even better. Been like, yeah, get him, get that Jesus guy,
get him, yeah.
I'm just gonna go over here because I'm someone else. I'm someone else here, ladies and gentlemen.
It's not me. I am not Jesus. I'm just
Wasn't
watching.
me.
That is clearly Jesus. Kill him. So this is known as substitution hypothesis. It's also found in different Gnostic sources discovered among the Nag Hammadi library that mention similar reports where Jesus is not crucified, but somebody else is killed instead of him. And yes, some of those are, for example, Book of Thomas the Contender and the Second Treatise of Great Seth. But here is the thing. I talked with Bart Ehrman about this and where these reports actually come from and what their authenticity is. And he himself, as somebody who doesn't believe in any of it, says that the idea that Jesus wasn't crucified, that somebody else was killed instead of him, is an idea that came into existence later as Christianity developed and was orally transmitted to people. And it is something that has no basis in reality. It's completely made up. It is a fiction created by different people in order to somehow explain their beliefs, because they believe, okay, Jesus is completely divine, so how can this divine figure suffer? How can this divine figure bleed or die? You know, they don't agree with the whole Trinitarian explanations to it, so they come up with their own explanations and say, well, okay, he didn't. It was actually a human body, and Jesus himself was separated from that. But the issue is, they had those ideas because they thought Jesus is divine, because they thought Jesus is more than human. But now Islam comes along many centuries later and adopts this idea, which you only find in later heretical sources, that Jesus wasn't crucified, that somebody was crucified instead of him. And Islam strictly rejects this idea that Jesus was crucified, but it does so for no proper reason. It adopts this story from people who believe in Jesus' divinity. It says no, they think they crucified him, but they did not. It was actually somebody else. Okay, but why exactly? It doesn't make any sense. According to Islam, Jesus was just a prophet, just a regular human. He could have been killed. He could have been crucified. But Muslims, with the Quran, adopted this story without knowing why they adopted it. The story is put in such a way because of the divinity of Jesus. And you can also find, related stuff like this in the Quran, where the Quran also adopts some stories about Jesus from those sources again, like from the infancy Gospels, for example. It adopts stories like that Jesus had turned clay birds into actual birds, blew life into them, and made them fly away. Like, this is a story that you find in the Quran, but when you think more deeply about it, it doesn't really make sense, because this story is found in infancy gospels as part of the idea that Jesus is God, that he can give life to inanimate beings, which is why he, as the God that he is, blows life into clay birds and makes them fly away. But but Islam somehow gets this story through folk influences and adopts it into Islam, while also claiming that only Allah himself can, give life. But then you have a story in the Quran in which it explains that Jesus actually turned clay things into into real birds and made them fly. But why? It doesn't make sense, right? Anyway, so lots of examples to that are found in the Quran, where it shows that the Quran, in a corrupted, ignorant way, adopted these ideas.
Yeah, and you've pointed out the great irony in all of this. That so you go back to the first century, and Christians had this idea of the incarnation, that God entered creation as Jesus of Nazareth, and that the eternal divine word entered creation, takes on human flesh, and now you have something that is simultaneously God and man, simultaneously has two natures. There are two directions, there are two heretical directions you can go from that. You could claim that he's just a mere human being, or you could claim that he's just divine, and then you could avoid the idea of the incarnation. And then so this is the great irony that the people who said Jesus was only divine then needed to explain how he could be crucified. And so they came up with these explanations, but then we find Muslims adopting the exact same explanation when that the explanations were based on the idea that Jesus is only divine. He's not a physical human. And Muslims take the exact same explanations and then say, aha, you see? And even to this day, when I challenge Muslims where this idea is coming from, or to defend what the Quran says, they'll start sending me to these second and third century gospels, Gnostic gospels, and so on. Say, hey, it says he didn't die. It's like, are you paying attention to why he didn't die according to this? Because it completely contradicts your religion. So anyway, uh, the real question here, because it's obvious that the standard Islamic narrative of substitution theory uh, is being plagiarized from earlier heretical Christian sources that under no circumstances can be interpreted as Islamic. And so the real question for Muslims is this happening? Is this plagiarism happening at the level of the Quran, or is it happening at the level of the commentary later on? And because I will say the Quran verse is very, very vague. It doesn't say anything about God taking Judas and disguising Judas or something like that. It just says it appeared so to the Jews. And it doesn't say what. It's just appeared to them as if they're crucifying and killing Jesus and getting a victory over Jesus. Doesn't add all those other details. Those come from commentary. Those come from commentators who are trying to explain what the Quran is saying. So, in other words, if this is what the Quran is actually saying, if the Quran is advocating this substitution theory about Jesus, then this was obviously plagiarized from earlier sources. If the Quran isn't saying that, but later Muslim commentators are saying it, then the influence is at the level of the commentators, not on the Quran. So it wouldn't be a problem for the Quran if the Quran isn't actually saying that. So we're actually going to look at an example of a Muslim. There have been many over the centuries, although it's always been a minority position. We're going to look at a video from Sheikh Imran Hossein, who's going to give an alternative interpretation of what the Quran says here. And then many Muslims are instantly going to reject that interpretation. We're going to take a little closer look at it. We're going to see he's actually got a point. I mean, from the perspective of Quranic interpretation, you can make a case that the Quran is not actually denying that Jesus was nailed to a cross. You can make that case. One quick comment here. Leandra says, how do I convince a Muslim about the deity of Christ, about the deity of Jesus as Son of God, if he's giving me videos based on Dr. Zakir Naik saying that he isn't? Leandra, go to my video. It's on this channel. It's just titled Jesus, the Son of God. Check that out, because I go through how Jesus is identified as the Son of God by everyone who could possibly identify him as the Son of God. So the Father calls him the Son of God. The Spirit calls him the Son of God. Jesus calls himself the Son of God. The angel Gabriel calls him the Son of God. John the Baptist calls him the Son of God. His apostles call him the Son of God. Men call him the Son of God. Women call him the Son of God. Even demons call him the Son of God as he's casting them out. So you have this unparalleled cloud of witnesses all identifying Jesus as the Son of God. And then 6 centuries later, Muhammad comes along and goes, what? How could God have a son when he has no wife? And Muslims go, oh, great point. That's a great point. It's a great point if you have no clue what anyone is saying, right? If your target audience is completely ignorant, yes, that makes sense that you would be puzzled by the concept of God having a son. Anyway, I think that the best approach, Leandra, is to just go through all the passages identifying Jesus as the Son of God, and then to use what we call the Islamic dilemma. You're pointing out that the Quran affirms our Bible, and I would just stick with that. I would just do that over and over again till your Muslim friend gets the point. Anyway, hope that helps, and we can always
Oh,
discuss it.
I want to add something interesting quickly. Since we talked about these stories making their way from infancy gospels and Gnostic gospels into the Quran, there's a very interesting detail that I noticed when I read through the infancy gospel of Thomas, which is so after listing a lot of things that Jesus does throughout his life, it says at some point that it was said that this child was either God or an angel of God, for every word of his is a certain fact. And the point that it makes and that it emphasizes there is, all of the things that you have just read about Jesus, people were so, speechless that nobody expects these things to be done by a regular human. So they think this must be something above human nature. It must be God or something in between, which was, by the way, also an idea that some Christian heretical movements had.
Mhm.
So these sources point that out, that people in that time, back then, thought, okay, this has to be God or something like God. But then Muslims come along and think, no, 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 he did give life and he did do all of these things and all of that, but no, totally regular prophet, just like any other.
Yeah, isn't it weird? I mean, like it would have been very easy to just deny all the stuff about Jesus, but they keep the virgin birth, they keep all these miracles, including raising the dead. They keep that he's the Messiah. They keep that he's going to return to judge. They keep all this stuff. And then things calling him, the word of Allah and a spirit from Allah. They're taking all these things, which there was a reason for those things in the Christian context. Namely, he's the God man. He's the incarnate. He's the incarnate word. And then Islam denies that. Islam denies that he's the incarnate word, but then keeps all the other things, which then make no sense. If he's just a regular guy, why is he so obviously special in all of these ways? And Islam just has no explanation. Just Allah knows. Allah knows. All right, so as an initial problem, we're gonna go through the video from Sheikh Imran Hossein. I did want to point out one point here before we get started that will help people start to understand why there can be other interpretations of this verse, and that is again, as I pointed out, if you just read Surah 4 verse 157. Let me go ahead and pull it up, and then I'll give you an idea of why initially there should be some reason to at least realize that you need to take a closer look at this before you jump to conclusions. Oops. Let's see. Where is my Quran? All right, here we go. This should work now. All right. So this is Surah 4. We go down to 157. So 157, they said in boast, we killed Christ Jesus, the son of Mary, the apostle of God, but they killed him not nor crucified him. Again, if you just read that and ignore everything else in the Quran and the immediate context, that seems pretty clear. They killed him not nor crucified him. But if you look at the surrounding context, and then we'll go to the larger Quranic context later as we go through Sheikh Imran Hossein's comments. But if you just look at the immediate context is the Quran is not responding to Christian beliefs here. The Quran, get your minds around that. The Quran, in this passage of the Quran, is not addressing Christian beliefs. It is not responding to Christian beliefs. The Quran here, in context, is responding to examples of Jewish blasphemies, according to Islam. So the Jews are demonstrating that they are unbelievers in certain ways in this passage, and the Quran is responding to them. So there are all these things that that the Quran is condemning Jews for. So you look at verse 44, their covenant we raised over them, and so on, and then Allah gave them orders, transgress not in the matter of the Sabbath, and so on. But they keep breaking their agreements and so on. So notice verse 155 here, in that they broke their covenant. They rejected the signs of God. They slew the apostle in defiance of right. Then they said, our hearts are the wrappings, blah, 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 blah. Verse 156, they rejected faith and they uttered against Mary a grave false charge. So accusing her of committing adultery or something like that. And then, in addition to all of this, so the Quran throughout this passage is responding to Jews who are committing various kinds of blasphemies, or they're demonstrating their unbelief. And here in 157, then the Jews say, we killed Christ Jesus, the son of Mary, the apostle of God. But notice, in identifying him as the Messiah, it looks like they're bragging that they thwarted Allah, right? Haha, we overpowered Allah by overpowering his apostle or his messenger. We got the victory by killing him and crucifying him. once you understand what the Quran is talking about in this passage, namely that it's not trying to correct Christian belief here, it's trying to correct the claims of Jews who are claiming that they are winning these victories over Allah, then the question you should be asking is, I mean, obviously, before trying to understand what it's saying, it should clue you into the idea maybe we need to understand this, because just in theory, based on the passage, this could be correcting Christian beliefs, because Christians think that Jesus was crucified and the Quran is somehow jumping in there and correcting them. Or it could be correcting Jews who believed that they had crucified him, but it's saying, no, actually you didn't, because Allah replaced him with someone else. Could be saying that. Or what the Quran is actually correcting here is their belief that they had won a victory, that they had overpowered a prophet of God and gotten a victory over God. That the Quran here is actually saying, no, you think you got him through this crucifixion. You think you did, but you actually didn't. Because, and this would be the idea, because notice, if you're looking at this, it says, well, it says they didn't kill him. They didn't crucify him. Yeah, and the idea, the possible interpretation, the possible alternative interpretation is, wait a minute, in Islam, they believe in a soul. They believe in a soul that survives. So you thinking you got victory over Jesus is just silly, because you're not killing and crucifying his soul. You might do something to his body and so on, but that's not really killing and crucifying him and giving you the victory. Instead, Allah just made it look like you got the victory. It was made to appear to you as if you got this victory. But Allah simply raised Jesus up. So Jesus is still around, and he's going to come back. He's going to return to judge you because he's been raised. So those are possible interpretations. But anyway, the point there of what I was just saying is, once you understand the context, that the verse isn't in a passage that is correcting Christian beliefs, instead it is a passage that is correcting Jewish claims, then you might want to start wondering what this verse is actually saying. And we're going to look at some clips of, we're going to look at a clip from Sheikh Imran Hossein, where he's actually pointing out, he obviously thinks the standard Muslim interpretation is completely silly and blasphemous. He believes it is one massive insult to Allah. And I have to say, I agree with him insofar as that. So the question is whether the Islamic view is actually insulting God, because that is the actual Islamic view, or if the later interpretation of the commentators is what's actually blasphemous and insulting here. Anything you want to jump in with, AP, before we check out this clip?
Nope, perfectly summed it up. Let's look at it.
All right, so here we have actual awesome Muslim commentator breaking this down for us. Wait a minute, we got all these super chats here. People are making it rain. People are making it rain. So we have Desert Empire here says, in the Bible, Jesus was crucified for blasphemy by the Jews and Romans. According to Islam, Jesus was just a prophet and preached Islam. So what was the reason for his crucifixion in Islam? Yeah, you'd have to say it. You can understand why Jesus of the Bible really upset a lot of people. But yeah, the Jesus you read about in the Quran is some guy going around saying, everyone believe in God. Everyone believe in one God, just one God. To which every Jew that existed would have said, amen. What, who are you talking to here? You go tell the Romans that. They're the dumb ones. We already know this, right? Instead, the Quran says Jesus going around, he's, hey, everyone believe in God, and everyone's, how dare you? We'll kill you for this. We'll kill you. You're finished. You're finished. Right?
It doesn't make sense. It's so dumb.
No, that's what I mean. So in their defense, they would have to say something like, Jesus was stepping on the toes of the hypocrites or something like that, and they wanted to kill him. But again, it is interesting that in the Quran they're bragging about killing the Messiah. So it seems to be a deeper spiritual problem. And then Hyperdoc said, he's going into the Greek and Latin persona. Person, what is a person patristically? Orthodox liturgy uses singular pronouns the in reference to the Trinity. Yeah, you might want to talk about that. We could get some discussions of theology on here, but yeah, we're going to stick to this topic of the crucifixion here. All right, we have Sheikh Imran Hossein, Muslim scholar. He's known as he's known as a specialist, Muslim scholar of like end times things and so on. And so he
Uh,
focuses a lot on Jesus because Jesus, according to Islam, plays a significant role in the end times. But
yeah, yeah, yeah.
let's check this out.
When they saw him die on the cross, they were convinced he could not have been the Messiah.
And so just note, he's talking about understanding what the Quran is saying. So they're thinking, aha, he can't be what he was claiming to be because he's been crucified. And so it looks like he's going to go in the direction of saying that that's what the Quran is responding to.
What they did not know was that Allah made it appear to them that he was crucified. What's the definition of crucifixion? It is that you should die by hanging on the cross. What?
This is actually very important to everything else he's saying. And if you miss this, you won't understand his actual position. But he's defining crucifixion and death in a specific way. I don't think what he's saying here is actually necessary for understanding what the Quran says in an alternative way. But his definitions here, they're going to be, to say that someone was crucified is to say that he died by being nailed to a cross. That's not how most people use crucifixion. That's not what crucifixion is in the Bible. Crucifixion just means nailing someone to a cross, or even it could be tying someone to a cross, but you're putting someone on a cross. That's what crucifixion is. And then almost everyone dies from that. I know of one example of someone who didn't die from crucifixion. That's where they actually tried to take the guy down and save him. So he's saying crucifixion means you die by being put on the cross. And then he's going to ask what death is. And he says, death is when Allah takes your soul but doesn't return it. So then you're dead. It's only when Allah doesn't restore your soul. But he believes Allah can take your soul away from your body. Allah can take your soul away so that your body's there and has no soul, in which case it's biologically dead. But then Allah can return that soul, and then you're raised up. And so based on these definitions, he can read the Quran. He can read the Quran literally, but using these definitions of crucified and dead. So they killed him not means they didn't kill him in a way that Allah took away his soul and didn't return it. And they didn't crucify him means he didn't die by crucifixion, because since Allah returned his soul and raised him up, therefore he wasn't crucified. Now, you don't have to go down that road. You could just say, because there have been Muslims who are just thinking in terms of the soul of Jesus. Like, you didn't actually crucify him in Islam. You continue to live on. So you can't kill someone like that. But anyway, that's the direction he's going. Any thoughts on this, AP?
I want to add something very quick, which is something interesting that he says, which you may not clearly understand if you don't understand the Islamic way of thinking about sleeping and dying. In Islam, according to the Quran, when you go to sleep, Allah takes your soul, and you get your soul back when you wake up. And
Weird.
if you don't get your soul back, then you are dead. So these are the two deaths. You die when you go to sleep, and you wake up when you come back to life and get your soul back when you wake up, and you die when you really die, and your soul is not given back by Allah. That's interesting. I also find that he sounds like the Islamic Osho. Do you know who Osho is?
No, who's that?
some preacher, do you know who that guy is?
Oh,
Osho.
that guy, the Indian guy, right? Is he?
Yeah.
No, that guy's awesome.
Anyway, yeah.
That guy's hilarious. No, I actually like this guy. I mean, at first it sounds weird and stuff like this, but when he starts going, "Let me warn you," I was like, okay, this guy's kind of cool.
Yeah.
All right, shake and rod. Here we go. Now he's going to break down what death means. But guys, just make sure you understand these two concepts. that he's going to use, or the rest of what he says does not make sense. And if you miss it when you're watching this, then later on you won't understand what he's saying. So crucifixion means you die by being put on the cross, and die means Allah did not return your soul. And so you need those, because those are the meanings that he's going to use in the Quran to reject the standard Islamic narrative.
On the cross. What is the definition of death? Answer. The definition of death is that Allah should send the angel to take the soul and not return it.
Allah sends an angel to take the soul and doesn't return it. So if the soul was returned, you didn't die in the Islamic sense that he is referring to here. And so you put those together, you've got his basic understanding. Was Jesus put on a cross? Yes. Did he die by that? Well, maybe in the sense most of us would use, but not in the special Islamic sense that he's talking about here, where death means Allah did not restore your soul to you. And so he's going to interpret it in light of that. Anything, AP, before I continue this clip?
I find it too comedic the way he talks and the gaps he leaves behind.
Stop being so judgmental. I mean,
it's just funny to me. I don't know.
No, you're sitting here laughing at people when you got this weird hybrid German-Turkish thing going on. You're making fun of this guy.
I'm not making fun. It's just always funny to me to listen to these kind of speeches. Like, what is death? It is.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's funny because he'll like pause for like 5 seconds between phrases, and then when I made my video, I didn't want it to be super long, so I cut out the pauses, and then Muslims are, you edited what he said to make it sound like he was denying crucifixion. Yeah,
yeah.
Interesting stuff.
Is there anyone who differs with me?
A bunch of people. They're all Muslims.
The definition of death is that Allah should take the soul and not return it. Can Allah take the soul and return it? Tell the schoolboy, go back and study the Quran.
Hey, schoolboy. I like that. It says, can Allah take a soul and not return it, or can Allah take a soul and return it? Tell the schoolboy to go back. But I like that. Hey, schoolboy, why don't you go back and read the Quran and see what death really is? Huh? Schoolboy. Yeah. I'm gonna start using that. Listen, schoolboy.
He's making a reference to a certain Quran verse that is. Yeah, I will look it up in a little.
Yeah, we're actually going to pull up some relevant Quran verses because, guys, I want to be clear here. I like being able to point this out as a problem for Islam. Surah 4, verse 157, that Islam is portraying Allah as this cosmic deceiver who starts false religions for no reason, tricks and deceives even the people who follow his prophets. Because keep in mind, Jesus' followers ultimately concluded that he was crucified. Where'd they get that idea according to the standard Islamic narrative? Allah tricked even them. And that's like horrifying. That is a horrifying thought that you've got this cosmic trickster who might trick you even when you're trying to follow his prophets, right? That should be a terrifying thought, especially for Muslims. Because guess what? If Allah tricked and deceived the followers of Jesus for no reason, how do you know he's not tricking you, right? How do you know he's not tricking the followers of Muhammad? If he tricked the followers of Jesus, why not the followers of Muhammad? So I like being able to point that out. But once you understand some of the issues, some of which the Sheikh is bringing up here, but also some other verses of the Quran, you start looking at 4:157 going, actually, I'm not sure that is supporting substitution theory. I think there is a significant amount of room for interpretation of this verse. But let's go ahead and continue here.
Cosmic Trickster sounds like a new atheist channel that goes into making
Cosmic
prank
Trickster.
videos.
Cosmic Trickster. Cosmic Skeptic should come out with his prank channel.
Yeah.
Cosmic Trickster.
I want to bring up two Quran verses. So Quran chapter 39 verse 42 and chapter 6 verse 60 are probably the verses that he's referring to when he says, "Go back and study the Quran." Those say, "Allah takes the souls at the time of their death, and those that do not die during their sleep. Then He keeps those for which He has decreed death, and releases the others for a specified term. Indeed, in that are signs for the people who give thought." Very strange, but that's what he means. So Allah can take your soul and give it back to you, or take your soul and keep it, which means you are dead.
And that's why he was saying, does anyone disagree with me?
Yeah.
Does anyone disagree with me? Because he was gonna, hey, if you're sticking to one interpretation of 4:157, you got some problems, because you're gonna run into some problems with some other Quran verses.
Yep.
Someone put in the chat, cosmic knob fiddler.
That again.
That's wrong.
I'll always get to that.
Yeah, and guys, just, I mean, keep in mind, even if you don't have this verse, this is the main disturbing verse when it comes to Allah deliberately deceiving people. There are others, and this was so troubling to the early Muslim community that Abu Bakr, Muhammad's closest companion, a man who was one of a handful of people that Muhammad guaranteed would be in paradise. Abu Bakr got the guarantee that he would be in paradise from Muhammad himself. But Abu Bakr said, if I had 1 foot in paradise, I would still fear Allah's deception. In other words, I would think, hey, I'm stepping, look at it. Look at all the virgins. Look at all the wine. Look at all the little boys dancing. Oh, yeah, I'm about to step into paradise, and I've got 1 foot in there. I'm almost there. I'm so close. He said, I would still be worried that Allah's going to say, psych, haha, you're going to hell, ah, ha, ha, ha. Right?
Rug pulled.
Yeah, so, guys, there are consequences of your theological views, especially if you're viewing Allah as this cosmic trickster. So I would say to Muslims, guys, if there is a serious alternative explanation of this that doesn't portray your God as like Loki, basically. I mean, that's what Allah sounds like when you say things like this. He's like Loki, right? Remember, Loki in the disguises himself in the movies and stuff, can make him look like that. That's what Allah sounds like. But he's doing it to other people. I'll trick you. I'll make you look like this, and I'll make you look like that. Pretty creepy stuff.
That's funny. I never thought about that. Loki is actually in the Norse mythology thought to be the mischievous brother among the gods who just does terrible things and can't be relied upon. He's a deceiver. And Allah could be compared to that in a sense.
Hey, that's weird, because if Allah is the God of mischief and the Quran says what you have to do to mischief makers, I don't know. Anyway, so. Here we go.
Then what did Allah do to make it appear that he died? Let me warn you.
I love that.
And my language is sometimes very harsh, because that's the only language some people can understand.
Oh, hey, Pete, did you catch that? He said, let me warn you. And hang on, let's go back, because this is very important.
Let me warn you. And my language is sometimes very harsh, because that's the only language some people can understand.
Hey, AP, according to the Sheikh here, some people only understand harsh language. And therefore, we can't just go around being nice all the time. According to Sheikh Imran Hossein here, when you're dealing with people with some stupid ideas, you have to be very harsh.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind, AP. According to Sheikh Imran Hussein, it's okay for us to be harsh in our language when we're dealing with people who are making stupid claims.
Yes,
because
absolutely.
they might be the only thing they understand.
Only thing.
Okay, that's him. Well, I'm going to do that from now on. All right.
Don't come with this nonsense, because it is not only pathetic nonsense, it is absolutely sinful to say that Allah, wa na'udhu billah min hadha, Allah calls someone else to take the appearance of Nabi Isa alayhi salam, and that innocent man, innocent because he never claimed to be the Messiah, he was crucified.
He just called the standard, most common Islamic view pathetic nonsense, or pathetic nonsense. But
if you go around among Muslims and ask them about whether Jesus was crucified or not, the absolute majority, almost everybody, will say, no, Jesus wasn't crucified. It was somebody else. That's what the Quran says. I mean, those who know will say that. So, and that's what the majority of scholars have said. That's what all the traditional scholars say. So, and he just called it pathetic, and he said that's sinful. That's
pathetic nonsense. And and he's gonna go on here, but I mean, he's got a point, right? Like, I mean, listen, guys, think about what he's saying. Guys, you're gonna stand before Allah and say, aha, great job, Allah, tricking all these Christians into believing Jesus died on the cross by taking that other guy who didn't do what Jesus did and making sure he was crucified. Great job punishing someone else for Jesus. And notice he actually explained, he calls it injustice, right? And he says that this other person was innocent. Obviously, Muslims are going to jump in. If it was Judas, he wasn't innocent. If it was the guard, it wasn't innocent. These guys aren't innocent. But he's saying he's innocent of what Jesus did, right? He's innocent of the charges against Jesus. So you're saying Allah could just take someone else who did something else, disguise that person, make him look like Jesus, and have that guy punished for the sins of someone else, or what are perceived as the sins of someone else. That person can be put at a person's legal trial. You could take someone who's done something else, miraculously disguise him, then that other person gets punished and serves the sentence, or gets executed, or goes to prison, or whatever it happens to be. Allah can do that. And he's saying, what are you talking about? Judas didn't do that. They weren't trying to get Judas. You're saying that Allah did this? So anyway, this is interesting stuff.
That's a very interesting perspective to look at it from. To say, even if that person was guilty, who died, he wasn't guilty of what Jesus was being supposedly crucified for, and that really matters here, because we're talking about justice. We're talking about the justice of Allah here. But it's funny. I mean, it makes sense what he says, but the issue is, I think in the end, I would argue that he is the one who makes sense, because the Quran doesn't make sense. He's trying to make sense of it, but we'll see.
Yeah, and yeah, it is. I mean, it is interesting that you can. He regards this as like blasphemous nonsense to be attributing this sort of thing to Allah. But I mean, think about this, because the standard Islamic, notice Muslims have a massive problem with the idea of Jesus dying for your sins. How can Jesus die for your sins? Okay, what's your explanation? Oh, well, Judas died for Jesus. Like, wait, what? I thought you guys had a, and it was Allah. It was Allah doing it. Wait, so Allah made sure that someone else was punished in Jesus' place, but you guys have a problem with substitutionary atonement, right? So it's, anyway, it seems incoherent to me. Quick comment here. One Way Apologetic says, God bless David, and I'm still praying for you, AP. Let me answer. Let me answer on behalf of AP. Yes. Hey, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in God. Shut up with your prayers. Stupid Christian, stop it. Just stop it. You're finished.
You're finished, boy. No, thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, here we go. And
wait for Judgment Day with that nonsense.
I actually like that he's like, I mean, he obviously knows that this is the standard Islamic view, but he's saying
he's mad.
You wait for Judgment Day when you're going to stand before Allah saying, hey, great job tricking billions of people, Allah. You did such a great job starting Christianity, because Christianity wouldn't have gotten off the ground without the belief that Jesus died on the cross. And so thank you, Allah, for doing such a great job starting false religions and tricking people who follow your prophets and so on, and for punishing someone else for what they thought Jesus did. Yeah, great job, Allah. And he's like, you're seriously going to stand before Allah making those kinds of claims? Interesting.
Allah is the best prankster, best comedian,
the best of pranksters. We should start translating planners like that and say, since the actual word involves deception, we start saying Allah is the best of pranksters. Yeah. Guys, don't let me forget that. Don't let me forget that. I always blurt things out that are worthy of videos, or at least something else at some point, and I always forget them.
We should make a sketch where a Muslim dies and stands before Allah, and then he's like, hey, you were my number one prankster, favorite comedian. I try to be as good, but I can't.
You tricked them all, Allah. You tricked them all. You truly are the best of tricksters.
Oh, boy.
Pathetic nonsense. It's not there in the Quran. It's in your imagination.
Nice.
That's why it is. And yet it took the world of Islam by storm. What a brainwash ummah we are today.
Oh my goodness! He just said, "Wait, what?" He just said, "What a brainwashed ummah."
He called the
And
Ummah
yet it
brain.
took the world of Islam by storm. What a brainwash ummah we are today.
Ouch! And dude? What's amazing is I made a video going through this, and I still got comments from Muslims over and over and over again. Oh, you're misrepresenting what he's saying. He's not denying the standard Islamic view. It's like, how could he make it any more clear? He's calling you brainwashed. I mean, it's a video where he's calling you brainwashed and shaming you for the idea that you're going to stand before Allah and believe in substitution. And then Muslims will go into the comment section and say he's not denying the standard Islamic view. It's like, what does he have to say? What does he have to say for you to realize he's got a problem with your view? This is so weird. All right, here we go.
Well, then what happened?
All right, good
Well,
question.
then why don't you go to the Quran? Let the Quran explain rather than go on fancy flights of imagination.
Fancy flights.
You're going to tell Allah on Judgment Day, you caused that man to assume the appearance of someone?
That's what they're going to do.
And he who never claimed to be the Messiah, he was crucified. That is an act of injustice. You attributing injustice to Allah? What foolishness.
Pretty bad.
Where are the scholars who will correct this foolishness?
That is interesting. He's saying, where are the scholars who will correct this foolishness? He understands that it's foolish. And guess what? There probably are more scholars who realize how foolish this is. But you can't say anything because you'll be targeted. You'll be targeted like you're a heretic for denying what the Quran, what the mainstream view of the Quran is. It reminds me of Sheikh Yasser Qadi with the whole holes in the narrative interview. Every scholar who knows the history of the Quran, who knows about the different kirat, who knows about the manuscript tradition, every last one of them knows that this idea that the Quran's been perfectly preserved right down to the letter is complete nonsense. Every last one of them knows that. And yet they can't say it. They can't say a word because they'll get eaten alive by the Ummah and you're denying the perfect preservation of the Quran. This is heresy. And so they all have to keep their mouths shut. And so this guy's pointing out, it's kind of cool. It's kind of cool that you could, be all old and stuff like this and not have to worry about your future. Like, I look forward to that. Like, man, you guys think I'm talking trash now? Imagine me at 70 or something like this. Like, there's nothing you could ever do to me again because I don't care because I'm all old. I'm all old and it hurts when I pee and things like that, and I don't care.
That's a good perspective, man. I love how angry he is. I love how really genuinely angry he is, and he's shaking as he's like, "It's nonsense."
Yeah, yeah. I mean, think about this. From his perspective, you've got the entire ummah running around accusing Allah of being this divine deceiver, this divine trickster who, you don't know what to believe. If Allah can trick people for no reason into thinking that Jesus is crucified, and even his followers can be tricked by this, how do you know anything that's going on right now? How do you know we're even live streaming right now and Allah's just not tricking you guys into thinking that D Wood and AP and Imran Hussein are all in this are all in this live stream you're watching right now? Maybe Allah's tricking you about all of us and we're not here. Maybe I'm in Antarctica right now and Allah's just tricking you into you don't know what to believe if you believe in this cosmic trickster. He recognizes, guys, this is nonsense. And it's shame on him, shame on you for saying this.
It's funny because we talked about this quite often in the past. We made live streams. We talked about the issue of what it entails to believe that Allah actually made somebody else appear like Jesus. And we pointed out, you very often pointed out how people are actually basically with a straight face, with belief, saying that Allah has deceived people and thereby created a false religion, which he complains in the Quran. And so this is a huge problem, and Muslims should look at themselves and realize this. And he goes basically from the same angle here, but just saying This is not what we believe. We have been brainwashed. That's why we believe this. This is wrong. It's nonsense. That's not what the Quran says. So we are very much going from that very same idea that this implies that Allah is a deceiver and he's unjust, and Muslims have to change their view.
Hussein here says link or title of the original video. Hussein, I put that in the description box, so you can. I think the full lecture is he goes into like end time stuff and so on with a lot with Jesus, but I think the full lecture is like an hour and 15 minutes. But that's in the description box if you wanna check that out.
If you go to the description box, you see the link. Yeah.
All right, so let's see this.
That's why I have to be so forceful in my language.
Let me warn you.
Allah took his soul.
Allah took his soul.
They thought he was dead.
See, now he's breaking it down very, very simple on what happened. So Allah took his soul. Let me back up here because he gives a breakdown of his view. Allah took his soul. They thought he was dead. They thought he was dead in the full sense of his soul not being returned, according to him.
Allah took his soul.
Mm-hmm.
They thought he was dead.
They thought.
They took down the body.
Took down the body. So Jesus was on the cross.
They put the body in the cave.
Put the body in the cave. So he's buried.
They sealed the cave.
Sealed the cave.
Allah returned the soul.
Allah returned the soul. Resurrection.
As simple as that.
Simple as that.
Nobody knew that the soul was returned.
Nobody, well, some people knew, his followers did.
And Allah raised him.
And Allah raised him.
But let me warn you one more time.
In case you guys didn't understand me the first time when I warned you. Here it goes. We're almost done. It's only a few more seconds.
If you stick with this theory of substitution, you are going to be in a pathetic state on Judgment Day. Let me warn you one more time.
Uh-huh.
This is a simple explanation from the Quran.
Uh-huh.
And so, he did not die.
He didn't die. And you know what's funny? Because I went through this entire clip in my video discussing this. And I actually got comments from Muslims. Look, he said right there in the end, he didn't die. You see? So he is sticking with the standard Islamic picture. It's like, how did you watch anything, guys? Did you guys watch anything that this man just said? So yeah, what's the sheikh actually? What's he actually saying there? What's he actually saying? It's pretty straightforward. When he says he didn't die, again, he's going back to his original definitions that he applied. Death means Allah took away your soul but didn't return it, or sent the angels to take your soul and didn't return it. If Allah takes your soul when you're on the cross, and then they bury you and so on, and then he returns your soul, you didn't actually die. You didn't actually die. And so he says that's what the Quran is actually saying here. And you don't need all of this stuff about God tricking and deceiving people for no reason into thinking that Jesus died. And I would lay this down as a kind of rule. If you have multiple interpretations available to you, and one turns your God into the Islamic version of Loki, you should probably go with a different interpretation. But for some reason, our Muslim friends, nope, that's the only interpretation that is acceptable. If it doesn't involve Allah being a great deceiver, we do not want that interpretation. That's weird stuff, right?
Here is the issue that I have with this. When you look at the verse, chapter 4, verse 157, and you go into the wording of the verse, you see that it's explicitly says that they say they killed him. Then it says in Arabic, وَمَا قَتُلُهُ, so they did not kill him, and وَمَا ثَلَبُهُ, so they did not crucify him. That's what it says here in the wording in Arabic in this verse.
Mm-hmm.
But it was made to appear to them so.
Yeah, and this is where some of those other verses that are relevant actually come into play. Because I mentioned I don't think you have to go exactly with his
Mhm.
ideas about all of this. But let me pull up a couple more verses here, because again, same principle. The overarching principle, as far as I'm looking at this, is as you just pointed out. If you're looking at the verse sounds like it's clearly denying
Mhm.
Jesus' death and even his crucifixion, like he wasn't even crucified. So it's not just that he didn't die; it's that he wasn't nailed to a cross. Um, if you look at the surrounding context, start saying, okay, well, this isn't addressing Christian beliefs. This is addressing Jewish claims, and the Jewish claim was that they had somehow gotten victory over Jesus or something like that. And so, could that be what the Quran is denying? And then, once you look at some more Quran verses, then a couple other possibilities start coming into focus. So let's go through a few here. This is the Shakir translation here of several verses. But you have verses like 355, and when Allah said, "O Isa, I'm going to terminate the period of your stay on earth and cause you to ascend unto me and purify you of those who disbelieve and make those who follow you above those who disbelieve to the day of resurrection." I normally quote this to show that Allah is promising to protect the followers of Jesus until the day of resurrection, which doesn't make sense if you think the Apostle Paul came in there right afterwards and corrupted everything. Doesn't make sense if you ever, because notice Allah's going to protect them until the day of resurrection. That's a long time, right?
Mhm.
But you could look at the beginning of this verse. I'm going to terminate the period of your stay on earth. You could find translation which translate this as you're going to die, right? Because that's the normal usage. But translators have to take 4:157 into account in their translations and act like this isn't standard language for someone dying in Islam. 3:145, and a soul will not die but with the permission of Allah. Notice you have verses like that in the Quran. A soul will not die but with the permission of Allah. And so notice if according to the Quran nothing dies, a soul doesn't die but with Allah's permission, then when you say, "Ha ha, I thwarted Allah by killing Jesus," no, you didn't. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? This is part of Allah's plan. Look at 3:169. Very important here. 3:169. Reckon not those who are killed in Allah's way as dead. They are alive. Very important verse, ladies and gentlemen, for understanding. If you wanted to interpret 4:157 in some light other than the standard Islamic narrative, hey, if you're killed for Allah, which Jesus was, don't say they're dead, they're alive. So did you actually, if you think you killed someone like Muhammad or Jesus or anyone according to Islam, did you actually kill them? No, you didn't. They're alive. 5:117. This is Jesus talking. He says, and I did not say to them anything except what you did enjoin me. Serve Allah, my Lord and your Lord, and I was a witness of them so long as I was among them. But when thou didst cause me to die, thou wert the watcher over them, and thou art witness of all things. This is Jesus speaking to Allah. And notice there Jesus talks about dying. So a Muslim would have to interpret this in light of Surah 4, verse 157, and say this is after Jesus returns. So Jesus was taken to Allah. Then he's going to return later, judge the world, die, and they would have to say, that's what this death is talking about. It's talking about even after that. But if you just read this verse without thinking that 4:157 denies Jesus' death and crucifixion, you would just think that this is talking about Jesus' death on the cross. And then, of course, another very important one, 8:17. This is talking about Muslims who kill people in battle. Look at what Allah says. You did not slay them, but it was Allah who slew them. Think about what he's saying there. Because notice, these are people who go out. You go out, you fight in the Battle of Badr, you kill a bunch of people, you chop some heads off, you slit some throats, and then you come back and say, "Hey, I killed 11 people." And Allah's response is, you did not. Allah actually killed them. You were a mere instrument that Allah was using to achieve what he wanted. Get your minds around this, because just 8:17 by itself, let alone some of these other ones, just 8:17 by itself should start making you wonder what the Quran is saying. Because think, if you went and killed someone, in battle, you killed 11 people, you come back, you brag about it, and Allah says you didn't kill them, and you say, what are you talking about? Notice, is Allah saying the people weren't killed, that it didn't happen, that these people didn't die? No, he's saying he did it through you, and that you are a mere instrument of his will. So anyway, the point is, you have passages like this, you have verses like this, where Allah says, you didn't kill them, I did. You didn't kill those guys, you didn't chop those heads off, I did. I simply used you. So if the Jews are saying, according to 4:157, if the Jews are saying, ha ha, we killed him, we crucified him, well, think of that in light of chapter 8, verse 17. You didn't do it, Allah's doing that. And the idea that no one can die except by Allah's permission. If you read it in that context, in light of other things the Quran says, you would look at this and go, okay, the Jews said, ha, we got him. But according to Islam, Allah can use people as instruments to further his purposes. And so, as Allah saying, no, you think you overpowered me, but you're simply carrying out my plans, and Jesus is alive, and I took him to paradise. That's the issue. So again, as far as the Quran verse is concerned, I would say that's, given other verses in the Quran, that is open to interpretation. So my personal view would be, if that verse is open to interpretation, then you should probably go with the interpretation that doesn't portray your God as a cosmic trickster and deceiver. That would be my view. What are your thoughts? AP?
All right.
All right.
That's my thoughts.
So this is you know what I find strangest in all of this?
What?
Have you noticed how many verses of the Quran Muslims are quite happy to reinterpret?
Of course, absolutely.
And then we get to this verse, and this is somehow the only verse in the Quran that you cannot reinterpret.
Yeah.
If you read verses like, chapter 8, verse 17 and so on, before you read this verse, and then you read it in context and so on, yeah, 4:157 still does sound like it's denying the crucifixion. If you read it in the context of other things the Quran says, where it doesn't sound like where it sounds like Jesus died, and then you have these other verses where, no, you can't die unless Allah gives you permission, and hey, it's not you killing them, it's Allah doing it through you. And so when you take all those things into account, it starts to look like there's some room for reinterpretation here. And it's, for some reason, it's the only verse you're not allowed to reinterpret. Every other verse in the Quran you can reinterpret, and you come up with 50 different meanings, and Muslims have no problem with it, except this one verse. Nope, it has to mean Allah's a trickster who starts false religions for no reason. That's what it has to mean, and we can't accept any other interpretation.
It is really interesting that, as you point out, that this is such a big problem. Like they have to die on that hill here.
Yeah, weird hill to die on.
A very weird hill to die on.
Die on the hill of Allah's deception, dang it!
No, Jesus was not crucified. He was definitely not killed. None of that happened. It's absolutely not true. I will not change my mind on this. Allah tricked everybody. I will not change my mind on this. Allah is a prankster. Allah is the best of pranksters. He does the best pranks. He creates the biggest false religion with the greatest prank. He's showing us how a prank is really done. And I stand by that. I am proud of that. I'm proud of Allah. It's weird. It's weird. When you could really just, like this scholar, sit down and look at it differently and look at it and say, hey, no, it doesn't make sense. Allah is, our God is not a trickster. That's not what happens. That's not what the verse actually says. What the verse says is he did not really die. He was not really killed. He was raised. You don't deny it. Don't depict Allah as a liar, as a prankster. That's very wild, and I warn you.
Yeah. Dawa over Dunya here says, Allah says it was made to appear so. How does that mean Allah is the one who made it appear so? Yes, to be clear, Dawa over Dunya. We're not the ones saying, yes, if you just read the verse, it is not clear who's doing what. That's the point. The verse is hopelessly unclear, right? Who's doing what? We already said, you don't read the verse and say, oh yeah, Allah took Judas and disguised him, made him look like Jesus, so on. You don't get that.
Hopeless.
We're saying the standard Islamic view is that Allah miraculously disguised someone. Again, either a volunteer, someone volunteered, I'll do it, Jesus, I'll be crucified in your place. And Jesus, oh, I'm so scared of crucifixion. So, I'll do it for you in your place, Jesus. So you have the Muslim commentaries that portray Jesus as a coward who lets someone else die in his place. Notice, completely reversing the gospel. Or you have this stuff about Judas or the guard, and Allah miraculously disguises that person to make him die in Jesus' place. And there you at least say, okay, well, it was a person who deserved punishment. But notice the complete gospel reversal even there. That you have in Christianity, you have the innocent Jesus dying on behalf of guilty sinners. And then the standard Islamic interpretation flips it and makes it no, the guilty Judas died on behalf of the innocent Jesus. Complete reversal of the gospel. We did have a comment here from, where is it? Dr. Khalil Andani.
I have to add quickly. It says the actual wording in the verse is, so they did not kill him, and they did not crucify him, and then it is it was made to appear to them. So it doesn't even specify whether somebody else was placed instead of Jesus. It wasn't. It's not specified who did that and why it happened. All it says is it appeared to them so, or it was made to appear to them so, as such. But in this case, again, it doesn't matter if Allah is in this verse directly and explicitly said to be the one organizing this deception. What matters is this is such a big issue. It starts Christianity, if you go by the Quran's narrative. It starts this corrupt version of Christianity. This is how it starts. This is the catalyst. And apparently Allah, who plans things and who sends Jesus and who raises him, is part of this whole plot of making Jesus apparently die on the cross, but then saving him behind the scenes from the cross, and then letting everyone fall into this big, giant deception and starting the biggest false religion in the world. And that's on him.
Yeah, it is like of all the various positions you could be glued to, why that one? Why the one that makes Allah this cosmic trickster? But notice, I mean, the phrase in question there, so it was made to appear to them, or something like that. You can interpret that in a ton of different ways. What's that saying? That someone else was made to appear like Jesus, and that's how Allah made it appear to them, or just, hey, it appeared to you like you got the victory over Jesus. It appeared to you like you killed him. It appeared to you like you refuted him or thwarted Allah. It was made to appear to you that way, but you didn't, because Allah raised him up, so he's good to go. Right? Notice that's what Sheikh Imran Hussein is actually getting right. It's like, okay, there is this perfectly straightforward alternative explanation. It doesn't sound like if you just look at the verse, it doesn't sound like that's what it's saying. But if you take everything else into account, I don't know. It's weird that Muslims aren't open to this interpretation. I did want to point out here this comment from Khalil Andani. It says, David, we talking about this next week? Yes. Yeah, so yes, we're talking. I'm having a discussion with a Muslim scholar here, Dr. Khalil Andani, next week on this issue. So we're going to be talking about the Quran's perspective on the crucifixion of Jesus. That'll be on Cameron Bertuzzi's channel, Capturing Christianity. So that should be interesting. And
that boring channel. Okay. Yeah.
One more issue before we close out here. One more issue before we close out, AP. I just mentioned that I just mentioned that it's weird that this is the verse, this verse where, again, if you go through the commentaries, almost every phrase in 4:157 is open to different interpretations. And yet, this is the one verse that you can't reinterpret. And if you go to the tafsirs, they don't agree on much of anything. They don't agree on whether the substitution was voluntary or involuntary, or if it was involuntary, who was it, or if it was voluntary, who was it. They disagree on almost everything. And somehow you're this is the only verse of the Quran you're not allowed to reinterpret. So just think of some examples here. Maybe you can bring up some on science as an example. But I'm just thinking, like, we read the words in the Quran: fight those who believe not in Allah. Say, what's that mean? Oh, it means only fight people in self-defense. Okay, so Allah gives this command, and you say, what he really means is, and you have no problem reinterpreting that. If you have like 434, that if your wife gets out of line, you warn her, and then you banish her to a separate bed, and then you beat her. What does it mean to beat her? It means tapping her with a toothbrush. Okay, well that's not what it says. It doesn't really make sense, but you're glad to interpret that in light of other things, right? You're open to interpretation. If you think of all the times the Quran affirms the inspiration and the preservation and the authority of the Jewish and Christian scriptures, right? 7:157 says Jews and Christians still have the Torah and the gospel. 547 and 540, even you go back a few verses earlier, 543, Allah tells the Jews they don't need Muhammad because they already have the Torah. 547, Allah tells Christians to judge by the gospel. And the next verse says why Allah wants different religious communities so that they can compete with each other in good works. He wants that, right? And somehow Muslims look at all of that and they say, what this is saying is everyone needs to just believe the Quran right now and throw out their earlier scriptures. It's like Allah says over and over and over again, like a beating drum, that he's affirming the scriptures that the Jews and Christians have. And Muslims reinterpret all of that. What he's really telling you when he affirms the inspiration, preservation, and authority of your scriptures, what he's really saying is that he initially inspired them, but you all corrupted them, and now you all have to read the Quran. Exact opposite of what Allah says in the Quran. And they're happy to reinterpret all of that, no matter how clear. And then, as you've had plenty of experience in this, AP, talking about these scientific issues, can you think of any verses that seem to be saying one thing, like 4:157 seems like it's saying something, but our Muslim friends are happy to reinterpret those verses? Can you think of anything like that?
Yeah, can I think of anything? I made a video of 60 scientific mistakes in the Quran where I listed a lot of stuff, but you can think about different examples, like for example Quran chapter 36 verse 38, where it says the sun runs toward a stopping point, and so it describes the sun running through the sky toward a certain point and staying there, which is also affirmed in the hadith, where Muhammad clearly describes the sun going to a place where it prostrates and then asks for permission to rise again in the morning, and Allah says, yeah, go, whatever, and it rises. And whenever this is brought up, Muslims reinterpret this, because obviously if you read it as it is, it sounds completely idiotic and wrong with all the knowledge that we have nowadays about the natural world. So they are happy to reinterpret this in order for this to make sense. You look at different verses, like let's say the one about Allah creating the stars as an adornment and throwing them at rebellious devils. There are many wild interpretations of what that exactly means and how we are completely misunderstanding that. Muslims make a lot of interpretations on that. I've had different debates where they say that actually is in reference to how the objects in the universe move around, and Allah precisely planned them, and the jinns there are merely used as an allegory or something of that kind, where others like Muhammad Hijab, for example, say, well, yeah, it's true, Allah does pelt the jinns with stars, and this is just something we cannot understand because it is beyond our comprehension. It's a metaphysical matter. Lots of it. Semen coming from between the backbone and ribs in Quran chapter 86 verse 7, a very infamous Quran verse which Muslims now try to reinterpret in different ways, where they say, well, if you look at the human body and turn it around, then it looks like where the semen comes from is somewhere between the backbone and ribs, so therefore it makes sense. Or you take the Zakir Naik method and say that it is formed during the formation of a human, in the embryonic stage, or somewhere after that. Semen originates from a certain place that happens to correspond to where the the backbone and the ribs would originate. Therefore, it actually
Which,
makes sense. And
which, by the way, doesn't make that. If you just had the Quran verse and you were saying that this is referring to embryonic development, right? That would be one thing. But Muhammad also said that the entire that all humanity was in the backbone of Adam. And Adam didn't start off as a little embryo, so you can't say it refers to the embryo, because God creates Adam fully grown. So if they're still in his backbone, then it still comes out of the backbone there. And so anyway, point is, it can't be talking about embryonic development, but that won't stop Zakir Naik from interpreting it that way.
yeah, Zakir can do anything. And of course, there's also one of my favorites, which is that Allah holds up the sky and prevents it from falling down on us with His strong hands. It doesn't say with His strong hands. That's what I added because it sounds funny. But the Quran verse basically says that Allah created everything and He spread the earth for us so that we may walk on it and grow things on it. And He also holds the sky and prevents it from falling down on us, which doesn't really make sense because the sky is not an object or anything that could possibly fall down on us. And Muslim apologists, like those that responded to me when I made those videos, for example, said that this is actually obviously in reference to how the atmosphere is held together around the earth, and how, if gravity somehow had a problem, then the atmosphere would disperse and move in such a way that we would die and all that. But none of that is in any way close to describing what the Quran describes when it says, and He holds the sky so it doesn't fall down on you, and so on. I mean, there are so many examples where Muslims are happy to interpret the Quran verses to make them make more sense, because the obvious narrative as you read it there is nonsensical. But in this case, for some reason, they want to die on that hill.
Yeah, so that's kind of the takeaway to the Muslims who are watching. We've had our differences in the past. we have our disagreements. But I mean, just completely serious here. And this would be my perspective from, I might organize my thoughts more and so on before, the discussion next week on Cameron's channel. But my real takeaway position is, if you have a Quran verse that is open to multiple interpretations, especially when you consider what the rest of the Quran says, you should probably go with the interpretation that doesn't portray your God as this cosmic trickster who deceives people for no reason. So it's to the point. Let me go ahead and say this. Here. If by some weird series of events I were to become a Muslim at some point, right? In other words, if the da'is were to convince me, if they were to insult me into agreeing with them, because that seems to be the strategy. We'll just insult you until you agree with us. If they were somehow to insult me into submission, I said, you know what? Gosh, so many insults, so many death threats. I have to believe that this is the true religion. And I were to convert based on what I know about the Quran, affirming the scriptures of the Jews and Christians, and based on what I know about what the Quran says in 4:157, and how at least the interpretations of that were influenced by heretical Christian sources. Knowing all of that, if I were to convert to Islam, this is what I would conclude. I would conclude 4:157 has been misinterpreted by Muslims because the Quran is affirming earlier scriptures which clearly claim that Jesus died by crucifixion. That's also a fact of history, and the only way around it is to portray God as a deceiver. I'm not going to do that. And therefore, I'm going to conclude that 4:157 is not denying the crucifixion. And as far as other things like the deity of Christ and so on, I would have to say, okay, the Quran is affirming your earlier scriptures, but you must somehow be misinterpreting those passages. If you're concluding that Jesus is God, you have to be misinterpreting those. And you would have to say things like, okay, Jesus obviously wasn't dying for the sins of others, so he was dying like other prophets have died. But even as a Muslim, I would have a massive problem with the standard Islamic narrative. I would say I can't accept that. I can't accept that position. So this is all to just encourage those of you who are watching. Of all the verses that you are unwilling to reinterpret in the Quran, how is this a very ambiguous, very confusing verse that, at least on the standard interpretation, portrays God as a deceiver? And you don't have to. You are not glued to that. You do not have to agree with that interpretation. Why would you demand to stick to that interpretation when you're so completely confident in reinterpreting all the other verses in the Quran? It's so weird. That's so weird to me.
Yeah. I would say, if I, for some reason, for some very, very strange, extremely weird miracle, somehow converted to Islam again in some weird fantasy world, I would probably have to conclude that the Quran is not the direct, unchangeable word of Allah, but that it is somehow, a different guide that went through channels, and that is just for us, written by fallible humans, and not of an infallible nature. Because even if I somehow converted to Islam, it would be very hard for me to agree that such a terrible book is actually written by an almighty, by the Almighty Creator. But I would also say that's very far-fetched, because not even a miracle could make me believe in Islam at this point, ever.
Yeah. Now you're starting to sound like Richard Dawkins. Nothing will make me believe. You can never correct anything I believe. Ha ha!
You see.
Here's another example. So this is Isa 87 here. This is from earlier when we were mentioning when I responded to a comment by Dawa over Dunya. But Isa here said, Dawa over Dunya tried saying that Thomas was simply in shock when he called Jesus my God. So if anyone is new to this, I'm not bringing this up just to respond to Dawa over Dunya. This is another point about what we're saying. In the Gospel of John, Jesus post-resurrection appears to Thomas, and Thomas says, "My Lord and my God." And so it looks like Dawa over Dunya is saying that Thomas just went into shock and said, "Oh my God," like someone in America would say, right? "Oh my God," not realizing Dawa over Dunya. That's something that people say today. That is not something Jews say. Jews would regard that as taking the Lord's name in vain. They didn't shout out, "Oh my God." They didn't say that.
OMG.
Yeah, they did. That's not a Jewish saying, right? They had a bit more reverence for calling people God and Lord than that. But anyway, the reason I wanted to bring that up was not to even correct the point. The point here is, notice, you're perfectly willing to reinterpret what someone is saying to bring it in line with your beliefs. Well, Thomas couldn't be calling Jesus God there, so he must be saying something. You're perfectly willing to reinterpret things like that. Why not a verse that is eminently open to reinterpretation? 4:157. There has always been a minority Muslim view, even among scholars, that this verse is not denying the crucifixion of Jesus, that it's saying something much deeper about people not being able to get the victory over Allah. And even if you think you have, Allah is simply raising people, and so they're safe. And so there's always been this alternative explanation. And so why not go with it here? It really looks like you just like being on the opposite end of a Christian doctrine. That's what it looks like.
It's also very strange. I did this. I asked the same thing to Sajid Lippin when he had a back and forth with me about Jesus in the Gospels and the Quran, where he said his position was, which is not the most popular one. His position was that the Gospels that we have today are, preserved and are as they were revealed by Allah, but that they are nowadays translated and read in a corrupt Christian light. But he was sticking to the idea that they are authentic Gospels, and for some reason he was trying to argue that things in the Gospel of John are taken out of context or wrong, and that the Gospel of John actually makes perfect sense, and that Jesus is not divine and not the Son of God according to the Gospel of John. And I just thought, why in the world would you ever attempt to recognize the Gospel of John from an Islamic point of view
Mm-hmm.
as an authentic scripture by Allah, and then somehow try to play with it and twist it? I mean, every line in that gospel refutes Islam.
Yeah, and that's just the position that Allah has put people in. All right, we're gonna close out here in a second. Someone get a dollar super chat ready. Someone just put a dollar in the super chat because earlier. Oh, there we go. Earlier, when people were putting in super chats, I was thinking, oh, they're making it rain. They're making it rain. And anyway, I was thinking we need a stripper, ladies and gentlemen. Since people are making it rain, we need a stripper. Now, can anyone think of some part-time stripper who'd be happy to volunteer here for us?
I know the answer immediately, but I would like the chat to contribute to this.
So can anyone think? Can anyone come up with a part-time stripper that we might want to make dance for us? We might want to make dance for us when they make it rain.
Anyone?
Here we go. Ready?
Ready.
Since they made it rain. Classic.
Wow, that's good. You should use it every single time.
Yeah, we should do that. And we should. I don't think I want to do that every single super chat, but I might want to use it every show when we get some super chats. Hyperdoc said, "I'll strip if you answer that person question from earlier." What question from earlier? Keep in mind, we don't want you to strip, Hyperdocs, but
Hyperdocs misunderstood the topic here and thinks we're looking for strippers, but no, that's not what we're doing.
we're really looking for strippers, everyone. We really want them.
We already got a stripper.
Part-time stripper, Mohammed Hijab.
Yeah.
And then we had so how many lies are there in the Quran, and which one is the most obvious, and how much these interpretations differ from some centuries ago? Yeah, this is there are lots of different interpretations of this verse because there are lots of things in the verse that are confusing, and so yep, just an ongoing issue. And notice this is a situation where we're trying to help. I'm actually legitimately trying to help here. I think you should be open to other interpretations of 4:157 in light of the historical evidence, in light of what your theology requires if you go with certain interpretations, and even look at scholars like Sheikh Imran Hussein, who, guys, you are believing in some really weird stuff here. You need to stop. And I agree. You need to stop with the stop calling God a cosmic deceiver. Stop it.
Get some help. You should play that video. You know that video by is that Michael Jordan? Yeah, the Michael Jordan video where he says, "Stop it, get some help." Yeah. Anyway.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. Well, that's what we wanted to cover here. We were going to cover a video which I think is going to be the most epic live stream in history on your channel yesterday. Things didn't work out. Because you can never trust an atheist to be reliable with anything, but unless something goes horribly wrong, we'll get back to that on AP's channel this coming Saturday. So guys, you don't want to miss this. I'm not joking. I'm not exaggerating. I think this is going to be one of the most epic live streams in history. Very powerful. So you want to check that out.
That will be happening on my channel on the weekend. Yes.
And Gotta be pretty, 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 pretty awesome. You'll be ashamed of yourself forever if you miss it. So keep that in mind
It's
when
gonna
you're
be
deciding what
pretty
to do
good.
next
Pretty
Saturday.
good.
All right, everyone.
Pretty good. Yeah.
Any last final concluding thought for everyone, AP?
All right. No, my final thoughts are always none of this makes sense. Stay away from Islam.
And I'll just say, in addition to that, stop accusing God of being a cosmic deceiver. Get a better theology. Hope that helps.
Stop it. Get some help.
Get some help.